We could probably spend the entire interview just talking about your 34 years here in the orchestra, but if it's even possible, can you maybe just share 3 or 4 of your favorite memories or experiences or performances of your time here in the Philharmonic?
It's so hard, when thinking about that, it's hard for me to pick favorite performances per se. We go through so much stuff. And I'll be honest with you, that not all of the performances are fun. Sometimes they're kind of hectic, and I come out like this. And I've learned to just try to let them go as best I can. But I think if I have to think about my tenure here at the Philharmonic, I think a couple of things. I think of the touring that we've done. I feel like I've joined the New York Philharmonic and I've had the opportunity to see the world. Mm-hmm. And that is such a blessing. Such a blessing to be a part of this great orchestra and to travel around the world and see all of that. I think of my first music director was Zubin, who was just such a happy, encouraging person to work with. It seemed like any time that there was a trumpet solo, he'd look back at me with this grin like, this is going to be great. And I would go, okay, and let it fly. And he was so encouraging. And that was such a great experience. I'll always remember him. And that transfers to the first concerto that I did with the Philharmonic here was the Tomasi trumpet concerto. And he was such a great conductor to work with. He stuck to me like glue. I didn't have to worry about what he was doing. And again, it was just such a positive experience. And then, let's see, what else?
Just to add one thing, it's like, I'm not in the orchestral world, but I have so many friends and work with so many folks who are. What a great story, because most of the time it's not affinity for the people standing on the podium and making you feel like they're going to get the best out of you. So what a wonderful story that Zubin had that quality about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And having worked with so many great conductors, just a litany of terrific conductors, and to be able to listen to them and hear what they say and absorb it into your playing, and it's just been great. It's been really terrific.
That's amazing. Well, this is also an extension of talking about the New York Philharmonic, but having worked with all 3 of you over the years, it's always amazed me how, to many people's estimation, and certainly mine, the 3 finest principal brass players in the world all ended up in the same orchestra at the same time, namely yourself, Phil Myers, and Joe Alessi. Can you talk about your relationship with Joe and Phil, and just what it's been like working together, the 3 of you, for 3 decades now?
First of all, I'll just say, I don't think we think of ourselves as the 3 whatever. We just think of ourselves as 3 amigos, and it's just, I think I think I can speak for all of us at this moment and say that I think we're all here individually trying to just do the best we can. And like any great thing, when I was just talking about conductors or players, I think we feed off of each other. We each bring something to the game that perhaps the other one might be lacking. For instance, with Myers, I think when he came, I think what he brought to my game was a greater awareness of rhythmic intensity and fitting in rhythm-wise, and that was something that perhaps was loose in my own playing, that I felt that he was sort of so solid in that it made me become more aware of that thing. For Joe, there's a freedom in his playing and a song in his sound and a confidence in his spirit that I need to latch onto. I'm not always the most self-confident of people, and so I latch onto that. And I think we all bring something to this game that again, for me and from my faith worldview, it's no chance that we're here. We've been plunked here. We've had to learn to get along with each other because we're very different people, and I think we've done that. I think at the end of the day, I'm just tremendously grateful for the opportunity to work with both of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've been fortunate, of course, to work with you guys collectively and individually, and I've heard you many times, and it's just astounding. I mean, you guys work together so well. I mean, the playing is just, it's like a well-oiled machine. It's always great to hear you guys. They're really tremendous. Well, if you took away all your work with the New York Philharmonic and just looked at your body of work as a soloist, that unto itself is quite impressive. Can you share some of your thoughts and some of the highlights of your vast solo career? We were trying to figure out how many solo CDs you've made before the interview started, and we couldn't come up with a number, so it's obviously a lot. I know, the solo playing that I've heard you do is just spectacular. So maybe just share your thoughts about how that maybe is different from your playing in the orchestra, and then maybe some of the highlights of your solo career.
I was fortunate again in that brass band world of being sort of the band's soloist, and so I had the opportunity all through school when I played with the New York staff band of the Salvation Army. Once a month we would be away, and I'd get to stand up and play. So that experience was very beneficial to me, of being a soloist, of putting myself up in front of people. It probably also helped a lot with auditions. It gave me that confidence there. Solo playing is very, very different. I even just did something recently with the Hart School of Music, the Wind Symphony up there and the orchestra up there, a tribute concert to the composer that's retiring from there, Stephen Gritch. And I played one of his pieces up there, and I also played one of Joe Turin's new pieces that was just written for the Ellsworth Smith competition that had just happened, and I sort of was one of the first guys to get to do it after that. And it's a very different thing. The whole approach is different. It takes me a while now, especially, to get into it again, to sort of pull myself back and refine myself out and play in I'm going to say in a smaller space. I don't mean that in a negative way, but sort of play. My louds aren't as louds, and my softs can be a little more comfortable, but I'm in this place that's just a much more, I have to learn to play in that comfortable place. The orchestra pushes me out into areas that are demanding in a different way in terms of sound and breadth of sound and power and stuff like that, and also softness and balancing with other instrumental things. But being a soloist is a very, very different thing, and you cannot play both of those roles the same. And I'll relate it as well to a little bit like with Wynton. I think when Wynton came on the scene and he was doing classical solos and his jazz experience, and he was able to work those two things, I thought, marvelously. But after a while, he sort of made a decision to lessen one and go with the other. And I think that's, you've got to be, I have to be careful now. I have to, when I'm doing a solo, I have to give myself time to get into the soloist mentality and get there. And then I find when I come back to the orchestra, it takes me another week to sort of break out of that and become back to the orchestral player again. Two different, very different games.
Wow, that's really interesting. I could almost see it going toward the solo thing would be a transition, but then there is a transition going back as well. You would think you just revert back immediately, but like you're saying, there's a transition.
I find it just embouchure-wise, just the amount of air that I'm putting through the horn has a tendency to push the embouchure out, and I've got to make sure I'm keeping it, when I get back in the orchestra, keeping it together and all of that. It's a very different game for me.
This next question, it almost seems like we've kind of answered it, but I think maybe we could even talk about it a little bit more. You're obviously a brass band enthusiast and a performer, and it's in your blood. It sounds like from such an early age. What is it, in addition to being around it and it being such a part of you, what is it that gives you that affinity for that particular ensemble?
Again, I think it's just something that was my first love. It's what I did. As a little kid, I wanted to be in the junior band, and then I wanted to get in the senior band and play that great music. And the whole cornetty thing, being in a brass band, a very cornet. And I often talk about this, even from an orchestral section, but in a brass band, you've got 4 or 5 guys on the front bench, the solo cornet row. And and you're 5 individuals, 5 fingers, but you've got to always be playing as if you're one palm. And the sound, you have to meld your 5 sounds together, and that was something I'd always found fun to do. And you could have 5 different, very different players sonically, and that combination of those 5 makes one beautiful sound. And so I've always loved that brass band thing. I love the repertoire. I love the challenge of the repertoire. I love the cornet. Even now, I love sticking my trumpets aside and getting on the cornet and just playing. I love the freedom and the wholeness of the sound. Not so much the brassiness of the sound, but just this beautifulness. I tend to flow towards flugelhorn. I love that for a lot of lyrical things. So that whole brass band thing to me is a lot of things. There's some great brass band programs in the United States too. If kids are looking for that, JMU's got a great brass band program. That's James Madison University. Central Michigan University's got a great program. North Texas State's got a great brass band program. There's some great brass band programs out there. And the negative is you'll never make money playing in a brass band. So get real. But if you love to play in brass bands, there's a lot of good amateur brass bands around the area, even in New York here. And the whole North American Brass Band Association is just a neat thing. There's a lot of brass bands just popping up, a lot of enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, that's very cool. I can tell the passion you have for it just in the way you were describing that, and it's great. And I love the analogy that you're talking about with 5 fingers into a palm. I mean, that can carry over into anything. So any type of playing. It's a great way to look at it. And clearly, as we touched on earlier, your ability to listen all the time, and even when you're playing principal trumpet, I know you listen constantly. So that's a great, for all of our listeners today, that's something. If Phil Smith is listening, we all need to be listening. So take to heed those words carefully.